All right, Rabbi, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Baruch Hashem, a guten chodesh. An incredible, incredible daf ahead of us today. So we begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors. Still for the month of Shvat. Today is the last day of Shvat. To thank Mrs. Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the Shumer and Drushos this month in memory of her husband, Avram ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi, Zichron Livracha. To thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating all the Shumer and Drushos this month in the Schus for Refuah for Shulamis Bas Susha. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Yehuda and Bracha Buchwalter, for dedicating the learning this week in commemoration of the Shloshim of Rabbi Yehuda's father, Rabbi Asher Buchwalter, Asher Zelig ben Yaakov Yehuda Halevi. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Gabi and Shana Cohn, for dedicating the shir today in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Shana's father, Mr. Avi Strimber, Avram ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi, Zichron Livracha. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors today, Alan and Sue Meyrowitz. I don't have Alan. What is it for? Just dedicating. Beautiful. Okay, just because, for dedicating today's daf, just because they can. Just because they can. Yeah, just because they can. That's it. Sometimes you just do things because you can. It doesn't have to be a reason. Tremendous shkoch, Alan. Thank you. Thank you. I will say with that, let us begin. We thank all of our sponsors, all the Neshama Shav and Aliyah, the families in Nechaman, all those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. So I will say today's daf is Chavtes 29. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Chav Chesem Abei's last three lines of the Gemara. So if you remember again, the Mishnah introduced us to a dramatically new idea, which is that a father has the ability to go ahead and make his son into a Nazir. Now, the Mishnah was quite explicit in telling us that this is a right the father has, but not a right the mother has. To which the Gemara says, Ish in, aval ishalo. So, right, a father has this ability, but a mother doesn't have this ability. My timer. So, I don't understand. If a father can make his son into a Nazir, why can't a mother make her son into a Nazir? So, here's an interesting machlok. Rabbi Yochanan Amar halachi ben Nazir. So, we'll say Rabbi Yochanan gives a very interesting answer. Rabbi Yochanan says the ability for a father to make his son into a Nazir is a halacha l'Moshe misinai. There was, if you take a look at the last rush on the page, the rush in the right-hand column, last line, halacha hi ben Nazir, kach ne'emar halacha l'Moshe misinai. So we'll say halacha l'Moshe misinai. Now, what's the beauty of giving an answer of halacha l'Moshe misinai? What's the beauty of that? It is what it is. Like that's it. That's it. There's in other words, there's no svara, there's no logic. I mean, of course, there's always a logic to everything, but the idea is, that's it. That's just the way the halacha is framed. It is a Sinaitic law. This is how it was given from Akash Baruch Hu to Moshe Rabbeinu. A father has this right, a mother does not. That's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Amr Reish Lakish, top of Chavtes. So we'll say first line 29a. So Reish Lakish says, K'dei lechancha b'mitzvos. Very interesting. Why does a father have the ability to go and make his son into a Nazir? So we'll say again, if you think about it logically, this is not how the Torah frames Nazirus, right? How does the Torah frame Nazirus? This is a process that a person undertakes of their own volition, right? You make a decision to become a Nazir. So what is this idea ultimately, again, that a father has the ability to make his son into a Nazir? It's chinuch. It's chinuch. Now I will say, this is very interesting. What kind of chinuch is it to make your kid into a Nazir? So let me show you something absolutely amazing. Take a look at the Rush. The Rush is our best friend. I feel like if anyone is ever undertaking a project to reprint Shas, just one little suggestion I have is the Rush should be a little bit bigger, right? A little bit more of a because he's such an indispensable partner in the learning of Nidarim and Naziros and Nazir. Sorry. So I'll say, take a look. Left-hand column, left-hand margin. Listen to this. The Naziros siag leprishos. So I will say, at the end of the day, what does Naziros teach us? Naziros teaches us the concept of prishus. Prishus means the ability to separate oneself from certain pleasures. I will say, at the end of the day, what's one of the most important pieces of chinuch that we convey to our children? Prishus. I will say, we don't give our kids every single thing that they want, right? We don't cave to every single demand, to every single want, to every single need. Part of what chinuch is a teaching of our children that they could separate themselves from certain things. They don't have to indulge every single want. They don't have to indulge every single pleasure. So I will say, so look what's happening over here. So now you have a fundamental machlokes. Everyone agreeing, again, remember, I want to point out, the Mishnah itself is not subject to machlokes, right? Everyone is agreeing. Father has the ability to make his son a Nazir. Mother does not. Okay? Why does a father have the ability to make his son a Nazir? So what the Gemara is asking over here is halacha l'maisa, why a father, not a mother? Rabbi Yochanan, halacha l'Moshe misinai. Reish Lakish, it's a din in chinuch. It's a din in chinuch. To which the Gemara says, I don't understand. A din in chinuch, ihaki afilu ishanami. I don't understand. A mother also has an obligation in chinuch. So I don't understand if it's, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that it's halacha l'Moshe misinai. Okay, that's it. The halacha l'Moshe misinai says a father can do it, a mother can't do it. Fine, that's it. The discussion's over. But if it's a din in chinuch, I don't understand. A mother has an obligation in chinuch as well. So why can't she be mechanech her child or preacher? So I'll say, I just want to point out, according to Reish Lakish, it's such an incredible yisod that just understand what's happening over here. Remember, we've already seen that kind of like the jury's out on the correctness of Nazirus, right? In other words, we have a spectrum of opinions ranging from Nazir is okay to Nazir is sinful. Yet you see, according to Reish Lakish, how important it is for a parent to teach their child about precious. That it's so important for a parent to teach a child, you don't indulge in every single thing. You don't. There are certain. I remember that. I think that like the new age conversation about this is with like children and cell phones. And I remember again. Okay, so my kids are already a little bit older, but so by them already was older. Like, where their friends were getting cell phones, and there's always the conversation. Well, Chaim has a cell phone, and Shira has a cell phone, and this one has a cell phone. And I always say it's such an important and pivotal parenting moment. So what? So what that everyone else has a cell phone? What you're like a prodigy? You're like a CEO of a Fortune 500 company that you need a smartphone at the age of 9? Like what are you doing exactly in your life that you need that? And let's say sometimes there's such parental pressure to give into these things which are just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, this is true even if it's filtered. Where's Naftali Langer? Right? Even if it's filtered, right? And even if it had, which of course goes without saying, you can't give your child an unfiltered device. That's like literally giving them fire into their hands. Even if it's filtered and has everything, why? And what kind of messaging does that give to a child? If you give them what they want because they say they want it, even though you as the adult know, it makes absolutely no sense. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. So let's say, so again, I'll tell you my own personal opinions on this at a different time. Anyway, let's say, so no, because it really is. It is such an abdication of parental responsibility when parents give their children these devices and they're young and they don't need it. And they need it. And the only reason they're doing it is because parents don't have the backbone to parent. And they don't have the backbone to say no. No, this is totally unnecessary. And so they just give in. And besides the fact that it's just a bad idea, what's the message? What's the message that's being conveyed? So ultimately, again, so we'll say, here's the problem. According to Reish Lakish, a mother is obligated in chinuch also. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Damar Halachi Ben Nazir Amat Lahachi Beno in Bito. So I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, skip the line. Kasavri Ish Chayv L'Chanich Beno B'Mitzvahs. So I will say this is actually quite fascinating. Reish Lakish will say, no, the mitzvah of chinuch is dafka on a father and not on a mother. Fascinating. The mitzvah of chinuch as formulated is dafka on the father and not on the mother. And therefore, again, according to the Mishnah, a mother doesn't have the ability to make her child into a Nazir. Incredible. Let's go back there. So Bishlam, I will say that topic also requires a lot more discussion. What does that mean? That a mother doesn't have an obligation of chinuch? I will say one can make the argument that in fact it is the mother who is usually the primary source of chinuch in a child's life. What it's talking about over here is when we say that a father has a din of chinuch, according to Reish Lakish, is the father has the obligation, the actual rabbinic obligation, to train the child in the mechanistic details of Yiddishkeit. That's the obligation which devolves upon the child. That technical obligation does not devolve upon the mother. But more about that at a different time. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, Damar Halachi Ben Nazir. So also let's go back. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So therefore, Amatu Lahachi Beno in Bitolo. So also now the Gemara moves on to a second question. So now First question asked and answered, right? First question, why father, not mother? Asked, answered. Question number 2, why is this a din that only applies to a son and doesn't apply to a daughter, right? The Mishnah indicates that a father can make his son a Nazir, but yet, again, it seems to indicate that a father doesn't have the ability to make his daughter into a Nazir. So why not? To which the Gemara says, okay, so the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, no problem. Mishnah Rabbi Yochanan, the Amr halachi ben Nazir amat lahachi ben in bitalo. What's Rabbi Yochanan always has the best out, right? What's Rabbi Yochanan? Not out. What's his best answer? What's his answer? Halacha Moshe Sinai. That's it. Fine. So it's only son, not daughter. But according to Reish Lakish, who holds that the ability of a father to make his son a Nazir is a din in chinuch, so why wouldn't the din of chinuch apply to a daughter as well? Kasavra beno chayiv lechancho, bito eino chayiv lechancho. It could be that according to Reish Lakish holds that the din ultimately again of chinuch, the formal rabbinic din of chinuch, applies to sons, doesn't apply to daughters. Doesn't apply to daughters. Okay, so Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan. Again, I will say it's fascinating because remember the whole chap of chinuch is the ability to train a child when they're young, even before they're obligated, so that once they become obligated in mitzvos, ultimately they're able to perform. It could very well be that in this particular idea, where the mitzvah of chinuch is in prishos, so maybe for some reason Reish Lakish holds that a daughter does not require chinuch in prishos, because perhaps for a daughter that concept is a bit more innate, as opposed to for the son, where it has to be a concept that is a bit more taught and actually modeled for him. Okay, it's fine. We're going to paskin that there's a mitzvah of chinuch for daughters as well. Again, in terms of whether or not the mothers are obligated in the formal mitzvah of chinuch, that's going to be an interesting discussion, which we will come back to if Meretz Hashem, hopefully we'll have time. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, halachi ben Nazir. So I'll say, let's go back. So that right. So first question, why father, not mother? Done. Second question, why sons, not daughters? Done. Third question, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, da'amar halachi hi ben Nazir, ahachi ben Nazirus in ben Nedarim lo. So we'll say third question. Why is it that this is dafka a din in Nazirus and not a din by regular Nedarim? So for example, nowhere else do we find that a father has the ability to make a neder on behalf of his son. See, this is actually pretty dramatic. A father is making his son a Nazir, which is pretty big. So why is this din of a father's ability to affect some type of new status for his son limited to Naziros? Naziros is a neder. So why don't we say that a father can make other forms of nedarim in order to go ahead and obligate his son in something? So according to Rabbi Yochanan, this makes sense. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, again, damar halacha he benazir hachi benazir nedarim lo. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan always has a simple answer to these questions. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's it. Halacha Moshe Sinai, it's a din in Naziros, not a din in anything else. El Reish Lakish, afilu nedarim nami. But according to Reish Lakish, a father should be able to do this ultimately again for other nedarim as well. In other words, if it's a din in chinuch, so let's say a father feels that he needs to make another neder on behalf of his son for some chinuch objective, father should be able to do so. To which the Gemara said, Lomi bai kamar. So we'll say, according to Reish Lakish, that is indeed the case. That for chinuch purposes, a father may in fact be able to make other nedarim on behalf of his son. Listen to this. Lomi bai kamar. So Lomi bai ben nedarim de lesle nivel, ela afilu ben neziros te isle nivel, afilu hachi chayav lechancho. So Reish Lakish will say, you're right. Certainly, in other words, we'll say, what's the chiddush? The chiddush over here is Naziros. We'll say, why is Naziros the chiddush? Because when a father is madir his son, what does that create? I will say, once again, we keep seeing this word nivel. As I pointed out in yesterday's daf, we'll say here the Gemara uses the word nivel in a totally different way. Normally, nivel means almost like a sense of what's the right word I'm looking for? Like where a person makes himself, it's not the right word, but a person makes himself disgusting, like menuvelas. Here, in this context, it means depriving oneself of something. So I will say, so interesting enough, the Gemara says over here, the chiddush is by Naziros, that a father could make a neder for his son which ultimately will cause the son to be deprived of something. In this case, what is he deprived of? Wine, grapes, right? That's the chiddush. But of course, for chinuch purposes, he can make other nidarim for his sons that are not deprivatory in nature or deprivational in nature, right? So we'll say, so that's the chiddush. That's the chiddush. According to Reish Lakish, we're only illustrating this law when it comes to Naziros because that's the greater chiddush. But of course, for chinuch purposes, according to Reish Lakish, a father would be able to be madir his son, to subject his son to other nidarim as well. Incredible. So Rabbi says, go weiter. Obishtam Rabbi Yochanan Damar Halachi ibn Nazir Hainu Diktani Micha Oshe Michu Krova. So we'll say, let's go weiter. So now, so we're going through the list of questions in this area. Next, we'll say the Mishnah introduced this idea that a father could make his son into a Nazir. How does the son get out of the Ned in Nazirus? Right? So remember again, how does the son get out of his Ned in Nazirus? So the Mishnah illustrated two ways. Number one, the son himself objects or cuts his hair. Possibility number two is the relatives object or cut the kid's hair. So I will say it's very strange because generally I will say, how do you get out of a neder nazirus? How do you get out of a neder nazirus? Again, if you're a woman and you're married, hafara. If you're a man and not married, right, or a man and married, doesn't really matter if you're married or not, right? Hatara. So yet here, the entire neder ultimately is dissolved simply through an objection. So what's the pshat? So Bishlan Rabbi Yochanan Damar Halachi ben Nazir Hainu Diktani Micha Oshe Michu Krovav. So we'll say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, okay, it's fine. Why is it fine? Why is it fine? We'll say those magic words, Halacha Lemoshe Misinai. Right? That's it. The Halacha Lemoshe Misinai says that the way to go ahead and dissolve this neder is through simple objection. El Rabbi Yosef Yechanin Amar Reish Lakish Kol Kiminei and Krovim D'Amrina Le Lo Sigmur and Mitzvos. So we'll say, I don't understand, but according to Reish Lakish, who holds that this is a din in chinuch, so I don't understand. Just because the relatives object, then therefore again somehow the neder is dissolved. Does that make any sense? So we'll say the lashon over here is Kol Kiminei and Krovim. Are the Krovim believed that Amrina Le Lo Sigmur and Mitzvos, that we should say because they object that we shouldn't teach the kid mitzvahs? So we'll say, remember again, according to Reish Lakish, the father's ability to make his son a Nazir is a din in chinuch. Specifically, which chinuch? Precious. So I don't understand. Because the father objects, because the relatives object, suddenly again, we don't have to, right? There's no din of chinuch anymore for the kid. Rabbi say, the Gemara gives an incredible answer over here. Kasavar, kol chinuch de lo chashiv lo nechale. Rabbi say, this is actually a profound answer. The Gemara answers, any chinuch which is not going to find favor in the eyes of the family is not a good chinuch. Now I'll say, now one has to be very careful with this particular answer, right? So take a quick look at the Rush for just a moment. It's really quite interesting. The Rush says, Kasavar kol chinuch de lo chashiv bezuna hava v'lo nechale kol chinuch she'in krovav mechashvim oso bizayon hava v'lo nechale linar. Any chinuch which the general family feels is a bizayon, is degrading, is not in the best interest of the child. Telo ratzu chachamim letakin chinuch kazeh shema yishma lekrovav v'yavor al niziruso. So we'll say, now what the Gemara is saying is like this. Now this is presupposing that one has a family that is steeped in Torah values, right? That one has a family that has the correct hashkafas. Otherwise, one could get themselves in a lot of trouble with this, right? My family is not accepting of my lifestyle, so certainly it's not a good chinuch. Again, many people run into that situation, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. That doesn't mean that they're wrong in their approach to life. What it's saying over here is as follows. We'll say this is obviously an extreme example. So what's happening over here is the father is making his son a Nazir, which at the end of the day, even if you say it's for chinuch, they will say, what is it? One word. It's extreme. So I will say it's not good within a family, assuming that again, it's a Torah-dika family and everyone is living the right kind of life and observing the right type of Torah values. It's not good in a family to have extremism. It's not good to have extremism. And therefore, again, if this neder is going to put this boy on the outs with the family, that's not the right kind of chinuch. Rabbi say, it's a little bit different. You know what the Gemara is saying over here? You know what Reish Lakish is saying? Rabbi say, do you know what the most important form of chinuch is? What's the form of chinuch? Is the ability to interact and get along with all kinds of Jews, right? That's the most important kind of chinuch, to teach one's child to be mu'urav im habrios, to teach one's child how to interact, to teach one's child how to be loving, how to be accepting. So if I'm going to give my kid a type of chinuch that separates my child from the rest of the family, that again, that makes my child the pariah, the extremist within the family. Again, I will say, we're assuming now the entire family is a proper Jewish family. We're not talking about, you can have a situation where, let's say, a person has an extended family that doesn't necessarily know or appreciate Judaism. So sometimes, in a situation like that, you could have relatives who are hostile to the frum relative. That doesn't mean the frum relative is doing anything wrong, just to be clear. Listen, we're talking about, again, halacha is halacha, derech Hashem is derech Hashem, that there's no bending, there's no yielding. He's talking about over here where the father is doing something extreme to the kid. And what's going to end up happening is, in a regular Torah Dika family, this is going to put the kid on the outs. That's not the right kind of chinuch. That's not the right kind of chinuch. A chinuch that puts you at odds with other Jews, a chinuch that puts you on the outs with your mishpacha, a chinuch that represents a bit more, makes you a pariah or a bit more extreme. That's not the right kind of chinuch. And therefore, again, father had a nice idea. He wants to mechanic his kid in precious, but lamaisa, if it puts the kid on the outs with the family, even Reish Lakish would agree, not the right kind of chinuch. So profound. So Bishlan Rabbi Yochanan Damar Halachi ben Nazir Bishum Hachi Migalech v'Avid Akafa. Oh, watch this, Jose. See, we haven't discussed this. But remember, we've spoken about the idea, we've touched on it, that part of the concluding rites of the Nazir, what? Cutting your hair. Now, I will say, it's not just cutting your hair. What is it? It's totally shaving your head, which I will say comes with a problem of payas. Payas. Totally shaving your head, right? I will say represents a problem with payas. So, one second. So, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that this is a halacha la Moshe misinai, so then, okay, that's why the father is able to shave his son's head, even though, again, by doing so, he's removing the payas. El Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chanina, Amr Reish Lakish, kedei lechancha b'mitzvahs, haka avid hakafa. And I was saying, well, watch this. According to Reish Lakish, who says that's what? That a father is allowed to do this. Al tzchinuch, what kind of chinuch is that? Right? So he's being mechanich, he's on the realm of precious. In the process of this chinuch, what is he doing? What is he doing? He's cutting his kid's payas. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Ella, I'm sorry. So Ella, Rabbi Shmuel Silber. This is very interesting. Hakafas kalarosh midrabanan, v'chinuch midrabanan, v'asi chinuch drabanan, v'dachi hakafa midrabanan. We'll say this is absolutely fascinating. Reish Lakish holds like this. So we'll say Reish Lakish holds the isser of removing payas. We'll say is when a person has hair. And what does he do? He evens out, he cuts off the payas, right? He evens out the sideburns, right? Or he cuts off the payas with the back of his head, right? So that's what he does. He kind of like does a straight cut across. The Isser Daraisa of removing your payas is only when you're removing a head of hair. If you shave your whole head, Reish Lakish holds, that is only an Isser Darabanan. Still Asr, but only an Isser Darabanan. Oh, so now according to Reish Lakish, you have two drabanans. You have the Isser drabanan of shaving your whole head, and the Chiyuv drabanan of chinuch. Reish Lakish will therefore hold that what? Reish Lakish will hold that ultimately the din drabanan of chinuch will set aside the Isser drabanan of removing payas. Fascinating cheshbon. So we'll say, now just point out, by the way, it is interesting that Reish Lakish is saying that chinuch is drabanan, which is very strange because we always thought chinuch was daraisa. We say it every single day in Kriyas Shema, v'shinamtam levanecha v'dibarta bam. So what Reish Lakish does with that, we'll have to see in Meretz Hashem. So let's go later. So both really, really great. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Damar Halachi ben Nazir, ahachi migalech meisi karban. So we'll say same thing. Remember, when the kid is finished with his neder nazirus, so what's going to happen? Father is going to bring karbanos on his behalf. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, this makes perfect sense. Why could the father bring karbanos? Why? Halacha Moshe misinai. El Rabbi Yosef Yechanin Reish Lakish kedei lechancha b'mitzvos hakamaisi chulin la'azara. But one second, I will say, according to Reish Lakish, that this is a din drabanan of chinuch. How can you bring karbanos if this is a din drabanan of chinuch? I will say again, bringing unwarranted karbanos to the Beis Hamikdash is chulun la'azara, is bringing unconsecrated animals to the Beis Hamikdash. That's a very severe transgression. So what's going on over here? Reish Lakish, kasavar chulin ba'azara lav da'oraisa. Wow. Okay, I will say a lot of chidushim from Reish Lakish today, right? So first of all, we just found out before that according to Reish Lakish, the only time that you're in violation of removing your payas is if you leave the back of your hair. You're only removing the sideburns, leaving the rest, right? Shaving your entire head is only an Isid Rabbanon. Now we've learned according to Reish Lakish that Chulun Azara is not a Daraisa. Right? My whole life, I've been operating with the assumption that Chulun Azara is a major Isid Daraisa. Reish Lakish says no, it's an Isid Rabbanon. It's Rabbanon. And therefore, both say the logic is the same as before. So you have a conflict now between the Rabbanon of Chulun Azara and the Rabbanon of Chinuch. And therefore, the positive Drabanan of Chinuch will set aside the Isser Drabanan of Chulun La'azara. Incredible. So, Bishlan Rabbi Yochanan the Malachi ben Nazir, according to Rabbi Yochanan who says that it is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that a father can make his son a Nazir. Ahachi kimitame maisi carbon siporin, but achel koin malika. Suppose then I watch this. Father makes his son a Nazir, and then what happens? Son becomes tamei. Rabbi say, what happens when you become tamei? You bring karbanos, you bring a pair of birds. What happens? The kohen offers it up. He does malika and he eats the bird. Shabbos say so. According to Rabbi Yochanan, okay, it's halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and therefore kohen has the ability to offer up the birds and eat the birds or eat the bird. El Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina Amrei Shlakish Haka Achal Nevela. I will say, one second, we're going to eat a Kohen. We're going to let a Kohen, not going to eat a Kohen. We're going to let a Kohen, right? Unless he's very tasty, right? In other words, we're going to let a Kohen do malika on a bird and let him eat the bird. That's an Avela. I was about to say, that's usser. That's usser. How are you doing this in the name of Chinuch? It was wild. Kasar v'yosef Yehuda, the ain't shchita lauf. So we'll say, not Torah, sorry. V'chulin ba'azar lav daraisa. So we'll say now we combine these two opinions. So it must be that what? It must Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda will say holds. Number one, midda oraisa, there's no need for shchita for an oaf. Right? Midda oraisa, you do not need regular shchita for a bird. You just need to kill it before you eat it. Therefore, again, I will say, killing a bird with malika, even just stam, for your own consumption, is not an issur d'oraisa. Plus, chulin la'azara or chulin ba'azara, ultimately, again, is also not an issur d'oraisa, it's only d'Rabbanan. So therefore, I will say, essentially, watch what's happening over here. When you put these things together, according to Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, in the name of Reish Lakish, so now a father can make his son a Nazir. Why is he doing this? Chinuch. Chinuch for what? Chinuch for prishos. If the son becomes tamei, he's going to have to bring a carbon, and the Kohen's going to do malika and eat that bird. No problem. Why? Because we're only dealing with the Rabbanans. Only the Rabbanans, because midaraisa, according to Rabbi Shmuel Silber, a bird doesn't need shchita. Malika is fine for just stam. You want to eat a bird, just do malika on it, not a problem, right? Midrabanan you have to do shchita, but at least midaraisa just do malika. And number two, bringing unnecessary karbanos to the Beis Hamikdash is also only a d'Rabbanan. So essentially, you have two d'Rabbanans, right? Two d'Rabbanans, malika and chulun la'azara, and a major d'Rabbanan of chinuch. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, Reish Lakish hold that the d'Rabbanan of chinuch trumps everything else. Wild. So we'll say, does Rabbi Yosef Yehuda really hold this way? So we'll say, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda holds that number one, chulun la'azara is only d'Rabbanan, and he also holds that an oath doesn't require shchita midaraisa. Does he really hold that? To which the Gemara says, now watch this, to which the Gemara says, Vatanya, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Omer, minayin lechata sa'of she ba'al safek. How do you know that you could bring a chata sa'of even on safek? So I will say, so Rashi points out over here, the case of safek could be ultimately, again, a situation of a woman who's not sure if she birthed something or if it was zivos, right? She would go ahead and bring a chatas ha'of al safek. But if you bring a chatas ha'of al safek, she'ina ne'acheles, that it's not consumed. So you could bring a chatas ha'of on a case of a safek, but it would not be consumed. I will say, take a quick look at the rush for just a moment. The rush is 2, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom of the rush, left hand margin. So keep going. Here's the case. Keep going. Safek zava violedes. So we'll say this is a case of a woman who expelled something from her body, but she's not sure was it a miscarriage, right? Or ultimately, again, some form of zivos. Ukitsas kasha demasha de pshita le de ba'ala safek. The Maisi Krad in an Achalas Tzarech Lomar, the Sefer the Mosafan. So I'll say, so watch this. So how do you know that a woman has the ability to bring a chatas ha'of ala safek, but it's not consumed? Talmud Lomar, Vazav es zovo, l'zachar u'lenekeva. So I'll say the pasuk says, Vazav es zovo, talking about a zav, for a man or for a woman. Makish nekeva l'zachar. Compares a woman to a man. How so? Ma zachar, maybe carbon ala vadai. Just like a man only brings a carbon zivos if he's absolutely sure that it's zivos af the keva mevia carbon ala vadai. So to a woman also brings a carbon in a vadai case. Uma zachar mevi ala safek. And just like a man could ultimately bring a carbon on a safek case as well. On a safek case as well. Now both say the case of safek is a concept of asham talui. We have this concept, right? Of an asham talui, where a person ate a piece of meat, they're not sure was it chelev, was it basar. They bring in asham talui. So a zachar could bring ultimately again a carbon on a safek. So I'm sorry, mazachar. Umazachar maybe ala safek afnekiva maybe ala safek. So the woman could also bring a carbon on a potential transgression. Umazachar. Miminshu maybe ala vadai, maybe ala safek. And just like when a man brings a carbon for a safek, he brings the same type of carbon that he would have brought for a vadai. Af nekeva miminshi maybe ala vadai, maybe ala safek. So to a woman, again, when she brings a carbon for a safek, she brings the same type of carbon that she would have brought were it a vadai. Fine. Imazochar maybe carbon v'neachal. That I will say, for example, when a man brings a carbon ala safek, what's the paradigmatic example of a carbon ala safek? Asham taloi. Asham taloi. So we'll say, so again, right, a man eats a piece of meat. He doesn't know. Someone tells him, by the way, it might have been chaylev. He doesn't know. Did I eat chaylev or did I eat basar? He brings an asham taloi, and that carbon is consumed. So I might have thought, af nekeva mevia carbon v'nechal. So to a woman, if she brings a chatas ha'of. Now, when would a woman bring a chatas ha'of? In a case where she's a safek, zava, safek yoledes. I might have thought that that is consumed as well. So af nekeva mevia carbon v'nechal. Amrit, Amrit Beis will say Amrit lo. They will say here's where the comparison ends. Im Amrit b'zocher shekin isser echad tomar b'nekeva sheshnei yisurin. They will say here's the difference. Here's the difference. When a man brings a carbon for a safek avera, at most, the reason why that carbon is consumed is because there's only one potential isser involved. For a woman, when she brings, listen to this, for a woman, when she brings a carbon ala safek, there's two potential isurim involved. Then I both say, what does this mean? So what are the isurim over here? So I both say, so for the zachar, I understand. I both say, when a person brings an asham taloi, what's the one potential isser that's involved? The one potential isser? Chulin la'azara. Chulin la'azara. Why? Because maybe the piece of meat you ate was what? Meat, right? Shuman. It wasn't chaylev, and therefore I'm really not chayav a carbon. And it turns out that the carbon that I'm bringing to the Beis Hamikdash is not really a warranted carbon. So every asham talui carries with it one potential isser, but because quote unquote it's only one, therefore again the carbon could be consumed by the kohanim. When a woman brings a safek chatas ha'of, right? So remember again, she admitted something. She's not sure. Is it leida? Is it zibos? So she goes in and brings this chatas ha'of. So the Gemara says that can't be consumed. Why not? Maybe because that carbon brings with it the possibility of two isurim. Now it says the Gemara will say second left from the top. Chav Tessim is 29b. Maishnei isurim. We'll say what are the two isurim? Watch this. Lav isur nevela the chulin la'azara. So we'll say, what are the two isurim? The two isurim, number one is, again, let's work backwards. Chulin la'azara. Why is it chulin la'azara? Or why potential chulin la'azara? Maybe she's not chayeves. And number two, nevela. Or we'll say, why nevela? Because how do you go ahead and slaughter chatas ha'of? Malika. So we'll say, what do you see from here? We were just saying before that Rabbi Yehuda holds that an oath does not require shchita midaraisa. And therefore, Malika is always fine. And Malika is always fine. It's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda held that Chulin La'azara is only an Issa D'Rabbanan, not an Issa D'Oraisa. Yet Rabbi say here, it sounds like both of these things are major issues, which is why, I will say, just to share this comes together, we're saying now the distinction. A man, if he brings in Asham Talui, that carbon can be consumed. Why? Because at most, quote unquote, we're only dealing with one Isser. When a woman brings a Chatos Ha'of Als Safek, that carbon cannot be consumed. Why? Because you're dealing with potentially two Isurim. Number one, Nevela, because if it's not a carbon, it was not shechted in the right way, it was shechted with Malika. And number two, Chulun La'azara. So you see that these are issues that cannot just be dismissed as derabbanans. So I'll say, so we have a problem. So Maskif la Rav Achabred Rav Ika, V'dilma Mechayiv Alei, Mishum Demechsi Kitrein Isser Midrabanan. So Rabbi said, this is interesting. Halach, so comes along Rav Achabred Abba, and Rav Achabred Abba wants to say as follows: maybe the issue over here, I will say, maybe the issue over here is that ultimately, again, it has the appearance of transgressing two isurim midraban. In other words, maybe the reason why she can't eat it, I will say, is okay. We're all on the same page. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda is correct. Hulun la'azara is an isur derabanan, and Malika is also an isur derabanan. But still, you have two isurim derabanan over here. So we'll say, in general, we know, by the way, by karbanos, remember, by karbanos, consumption is never ma'akev. Right? You will say, from a carbonic perspective, what's the part of the carbon that is ma'akev? Zrika. Right? Zrika. Achila is never ma'akev. So therefore, Allah, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that maybe what's going on over here is, look, it's isurim derabanan, but it's two Yisrei derabanan, and maybe the fact that it's two Yisrei derabanan is enough to say this carbon should not be consumed. Okay, fascinating. So I'll say maybe this whole thing is a machlokes tanaim. Right, now we'll say, so fine. So I'll say, so here's where we're at. Let's pause here for just a moment. We went a little bit on a detour. Here's where we are left. We are left with a fundamental machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Right? Again, Mishnah tells father has the ability to be madir his son, to make his son into a Nazir. Where does this power come from? Rabbi Yochanan, halach l'Moshe Misinai. Reish Lakish, it's a din in chinuch. We then spent in the entirety of Amud Aleph going through all of the various cases and trying to see how they make sense according to each of these opinions. The Gemara is now suggesting maybe the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is in fact a machlokes tanoim. Here we go. Admasei madires beno benazir. Until what point in time does the father have the ability to make his son into a nazir? Ad shiyavi shtei se'aros divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says up until the son becomes an adult, until the point of maturation, physical maturation, until he brings 2 heirs. Up until that point in time, a father has the ability to make his son into a nazir. Okay, the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad shiagia la'onas nidarim. Rabbi Yehuda says until the son reaches the age of what we'll call neder maturity. Neder maturity. They will say, when does a boy go ahead and reach neder maturity? Sometime after his 12th birthday. We assume once a child enters into his 13th year, right? Ultimately, again, that's when he's the Rush calls it mufla samoch leish. So he's still a child, still a minor, but lamaisa, we assume that he has enough cognitive or mental maturity to be able to know what nidarim are. So we'll say, so therefore, operating with this idea that a father can make his son into a nazir, until what point in time does this paternal right exist? So again, Rebbe, until the son reaches a level of physical maturity, Rabbi Yossi, until the son reaches level of neder maturity. So my lav tanahi, so we'll say, maybe some machlokes tanaim, the Rebbe savra halachi benazir. Maybe Rebbe holds, like Rabbi Yochanan, namely, that a father's ability to go ahead and make his son into a nazir is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. The afagav de'gia la'onas nedarim madir le'va'azil adamaisi shtei saros. And maybe again, Rebbe holds that essentially, even though one could make the logical argument that a father should only be able to do this until the son reaches the age of neder maturity, but halacha l'Moshe Misinai says no, he could do it until physical maturity. Rabbi Yehuda who holds that a father can make his son into a neder only until the age of neder maturity, savar kedei lechancho b'mitzvos, holds, like Reish Lakish, that a father's ability to make his son into a nazir is a din in chinuch, v'cheivan dinafik mirshusei su lo mechayiv. And ultimately, again, once the son leaves his father's domain in terms of nedarim, i.e., he reaches neder maturity, sulo mechayiv, at that point in time, again, the father no longer has the ability to make this neder on behalf of his son. So we'll say, this is what the Gemara wants to do. The Gemara wants to frame the machlokes between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, like the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rebbe, who holds that a father has the ability to make his son until Nazir, until the age of physical maturity, holds like Rabbi Yochanan, that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Rabbi Yossi holds that a father has the ability to make his son into a Nazir until the age of neder maturity, ultimately holds like Reish Lakish. Which the Gemara says, Amri lo. No. Dichuli al mahalachi ibn Nazir. I will say it's quite possible that between Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi, both of them hold that halacha l'maisa, the ability of a father to make his son into a Nazir, is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now watch this. V'hacha b'mufla samoch li'ish kamiflagi. So I will say ultimately again, their machlokes is in the case of a mufla samoch li'ish. I will say, which means a boy who has not reached the age of physical maturity, but has reached the age of neder maturity. So he understands nedarim. He understands the impact of his nedarim. So I will say, watch this. Rebbe savar mufla samoch li'ish d'Rabbanan. Rebbe holds that mufla samoch li'ish ultimately again is a d'Rabbanan. And therefore what? Va'asya da'araisa v'dachya d'Rabbanan. And ultimately I will say, take a quick look at Rashi for just a moment on the left-hand side. Rashi, Rebbe savar mufla samoch li'ish d'Rabbananu. The bolkin es nedarav im yodin limi nadar shemekayim es tvar. So we'll say now, watch this. When you have a child, right? So we'll say it's actually a very interesting case. So a boy who's 12 years old, meaning he's entered into his 13th year. So we'll say, so this is the age when Chazal said he may really understand nedarim. So what do you do for a boy like this? So Rebbe holds that what we do is midrabanan, we test him. We try to see, listen, kid, do you know what nedarim are? Do you understand the dynamic of nedarim or not? The both kin es nedarav, im yodin lemi nadar, shemechayim esar. We check him. Do you understand when you made a neder what the impact of that is? Do you know who you're making a neder to? V'helchach, halacha l'Moshe Sinai ben Nazir, da'av madres beno ben Nazir, asi daraisa v'dachi d'Rabbanan. Now I will say, now watch this. So Rebbe holds that in reality, when does a father have control of his son until the son exhibits signs of physical maturation? Shtei saros. Midrabanan, we say that a son is in charge ultimately of his nedarim as of when? From the time that he reaches neder maturity. Mufla li'ish. No, right? So we'll say we'll call that the 13th year. So Rebbe holds like this. We have halacha l'Moshe Sinai that says that the father could be madir his son as a Nazir. So therefore, the da'oraisa of the halacha l'Moshe Sinai trumps the d'Rabbanan, and therefore a father could even do this up until the age of physical maturation. Let me read that inside once more. Rebbe savar mufla samoch li'ish d'Rabbanan va'asya da'oraisa v'dachya d'Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda savar mufla samoch li'ish d'oraisa. So you know what we're going to do? Actually, we're going to stop over here for today. We're going to pick up, was a longer Amud Aleph, I'm sorry. We're going to pick up here, Meretz Hashem, with this machlokes tomorrow. I want to rush this. So I will say, so just understand now, what we're trying to do is say that the machlokes, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, is in fact a machlokes Tanoim, Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi. And I will say now what we're going to say is that no, in this iteration, we're saying no, everyone is going to agree, both meaning Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, that it is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, how their respective shitos align in Meretz Hashem. To be continued tomorrow, say shkoyach. What a daf. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron, have a great day. Good Chodesh, everyone.